Hey guys, Nish Quick here. As you all know, I've been really obsessed with Xenogears recently, and one of the coolest things about Xenogears is how it establishes the story and framework for all the following Xeno entries. The outline for the story of Xenogears is a timeline referred to as Perfect Works, which is part of a gigantic Xenogears encyclopedia book of the same name. As I played through Xenogears, I realized that I was noticing story elements, character relationships and roles, thematic elements, and symbolic, psychological, and religious imagery that reminded me of the other Xenoblade Chronicles games. And while Xenogears and the Cloud Saga Xenoblade trilogy are separated by decades and many console generations, these games share a profound connection that extends far beyond just their shared developers and creator. In this video, I'll be uncovering the intricate parallels, thematic resonances, hidden connections, and shared motifs that weave together the stories of Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and Xenogears. These games explore profound questions about existence, identity, and the nature of reality itself. And with what I know now from Xenogears and Perfect Works, I want to share the parallels and connections that I've seen through my experience with these games. Fair warning though that the connections and parallels that I make are obviously not going to be one-to-one and are mostly going to be similar in terms of storytelling, themes, and ideas. We all know that the events of Xenogears are confined solely to that game alone, and they're not really canon to the Xenoblade Chronicles series and trilogy. This video is going to be part one of a three-part series where I cover the similarities of Xenoblade 2 and Xenogears. In this video, I'll be exclusively talking about the parallels in the Perfect Works timeline. Part 2 will cover the character parallels, and part 3 will cover the thematic, symbolic, and religious parallels. Also, this goes without saying, but of course, major spoiler warning for Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and Xenogears specifically. Without further ado, let's get into this. First, I want to discuss the Perfect Works timeline shown in the first few pages of Xenogears Perfect Works. It shows the 5-part story Xenogears is telling throughout its entire lore and world, where the present-day events of Xenogears only happen in Episode 5. Episode 1 through 4 are all the past events that lead up to the present-day story of Xenogears. This timeline parallels the Xenoblade games quite prominently, particularly Xenoblade 2. You can break Xenoblade 2 into a 5-part timeline with the events of Rex's adventure taking place in Part 5 or Episode 5 as well. So let's go over this timeline first before I analyze any other thematic parallels and similarities in these two games. So let's start with Episode 1. Episode 1 is described as an era of interplanetary war. 15,000 years before the events of Xenogears, humanity left Earth, later known as Lost Jerusalem, and colonized a new planet called Neo Jerusalem. Over the next 5,000 years, humans expanded across the galaxy. However, interplanetary war broke out, causing widespread devastation. During this era, the mysterious and destructive Deus system was created, which is a key element in the story of Xenogears. Honestly guys, what does this remind you of? Because to me it is very similar to the events of the Klaus experiment. And like I said in the intro, a lot of these parallels I'm making are meant to convey things that are similar, not exactly the same. But an interplanetary war, massive advancements in human technology, utilizing divine technology to create weapons of mass destruction, and all this sowing the seeds for what's to come in the later stories. While the equivalent of Deus will be talked about a little bit later in this video, I will just mention now that in both stories, some man-made creation leads to utter devastation and the birth of a new civilization. In Xenogears, it's Deus, which crash lands onto the new planet and starts the events of episode 2 through 5. And in Xenoblade 2, we can sort of see this as the Trinity processor and Klaus's experiment that leads the world to utter ruin and creates the pocket dimension world of Xenoblade 1. Episode 2. Episode 2 of Xenogears is referred to as the time of the Genesis. In this new world, Cain became the leader of humanity and was worshipped as a divine ruler. Abel, the sole survivor of the Eldritch crash, opposed Cain's religious rule. Together with Elheim, Abel searched for a new way of life. This sets the stage for episode 2 of the story. Time of the Genesis can be equated to, in my opinion, Klaus's rebuilding of the world, creating the Cloud Sea through ether to rebuild the old world bit by bit. And by doing this, the Titans are born, and eventually new life is breathed into the world of Allrest. To counter any drastic and overly ambitious person like his former self, Klaus creates the blades to keep humanity in check and send information back and forth to the Trinity processor cores. Though there weren't any true main antagonists like Cain, the Gazelle Ministry, or Myang who were trying to resurrect a Deus-like entity, the genesis of a new world, humanity, and mankind is still present in this era of Xenoblade 2's world and can be equated to Xenogears Perfect Works Episode 2. Episode 3. Episode 3 of Xenogears is referred to as the Zeboim Culture Era. This episode takes place in a futuristic society with advanced technology. While humanity reached its intellectual peak, genetic damage led to widespread infertility. Kim, a reincarnation of Abel, tried to solve this by using nanotechnology, but failed due to Myang's interference to resurrect Deus. During this time, Emeralda, a nanotechnology colony, was created, and Tara Melchior, one of Shavat's sages, later revived nanotechnology, which he would later master and teach to one of the game's main antagonists, Krelian. The Zeboim civilization was a jump in technology and research within the world of Xenogears, and it immediately reminded me of old Judicium in Allrest. Not much is known about this time, but in Torn of the Golden Country, we learn a little about old Judicium and how this civilization was the first to experiment with blades, and were the first to blend human and blade genetics together to create flesh eaters and blade eaters. This technology is later unearthed by Indal to create monstrous blade eater creatures, and eventually was perfected to elevate human and Indaline powers to extreme levels. Though nanotechnology wasn't particularly used in this time period, core crystals and blade biology were pushed to their absolute limits, and as we might talk about later, core crystals and nanotechnology in the Xeno universe are very similar in some ways. Episode 4. Episode 4 is known as the Solaris War era in Perfect Works. This era takes place 500 years before Faye's story in the present day, on the continent of Ignis. During this time, Cain and the Ministry believed humanity had reached its evolutionary peak and established Solaris to directly control the surface and the surface dwellers, who they refer to as the Lambs. However, surface-dwelling Lambs who had developed ether powers, especially those from Shavat, waged war against Solaris. The conflict culminated in a catastrophic event known as the Day of Collapse, which eliminated over 90% of the human civilization. So I'll give you guys one guess as to what era of Xenoblade 2 this parallels. Especially to those of you guys who have played Xenogears, you're gonna get heavy Torn of the Golden Country vibes from this era, and the war between Shavat and Solaris. If any prior episode of Xenogears could be considered its own prequel game, it would be this one. You have an entire party of characters with your heroes such as Krelian, Sophia, Lacan, Roni, Renee, and maybe even Zephyr, who'd be like your main party of this quote-unquote DLC adventure. Torn of the Golden Country also tells a story of a war, the Aegis War, and it also ends in something similar to the Day of Collapse. Even though 90% of Alrest's population isn't wiped out, the entire Torn Titan is destroyed, and its destruction leads to the death and casualties of many, many innocent lives. This tragedy leads to Mithra hiding herself away in the persona of Pyra, and the tragic death of Laura leads Jin to seek a vengeful path in life. Similarly in Xenogears, Sophia's sacrificial death to Solaris leads to Krelian's loss of faith and his desire to create his own god, as well as the fracture in Lacan's psyche, causing him to become an incomplete contact during his interaction with the wave existence, leading to the manifestation of his malevolent desires and powers, Graph. Episode 5. Episode 5 is the present-day events of Xenogears and the story of Fei Fong Wong. By the year 9999, Deus's resurrection has been delayed, and the story begins with Fei living in the quiet village of Lahan. His origins are a mystery, as 3 years earlier a masked man brought him to the village, severely injured and with no memory. The attack on Lahan becomes the turning point that sets Fei on his journey. Fei's journey leads him to repair his fractured mental state and memories, and build strong bonds that will lead him to fulfill his purpose and role as the contact to destroy the man-made god Deus and free the wave existence from the mortal dimension. Honestly, I see a lot more direct parallels to the basic story structure of Xenogears to the story of Xenoblade 1, with Fei's call to action, his fractured mental state, the contact with the otherworldly force that guides him on the journey, mirroring a lot of what Shulk experiences in Xenoblade 1, but that's a video for another time, and this video is about Xenoblade 2. And we can still see a lot of parallels to Rex's journey as well. Alrest is slowly dying due to the dying titans and the abuse of core crystals and ether from the Indoline Praetorium. In addition, Jin and Malos are two antagonists that want to kill God or the Architect for their own purposes, but once Rex meets the god of this world, he confronts Malos, who's basically like a messenger of the Architect, and his man-made divine machine, Ion. Rex also learns about the world of old from Klaus, and how everything came to be, just like how Fei learns about Lost and Neo-Jerusalem before the world they know through the Raziel's tree and the records of the Eldridge. There's more parallels to the character arc, symbolism, and world building of Xenoblade 2 in relation to Xenogears, but I'm gonna save that for part 2 coming up next, where I'll be talking about how Tetsuya Takahashi and Soraya Saga wrote a lot of characters and character archetypes in Xenogears who have some very interesting counterparts that we encounter in Xenoblade Chronicles 2. So stay tuned for part 2 coming up soon. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Honestly, this 3-part project might be one of the biggest projects I've ever done on the channel, and one of the biggest undertakings in my entire content creator journey. So if you guys enjoyed this video or are just fans of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, or Xenogears in general, I would really truly appreciate it if you can give this video a like. Share this with your Xenogears friends, because I want a lot of Xenogears fans to know that there's a lot of Xenogears DNA in the numbered Xenoblade Chronicles games. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of some of these interesting parallels when it comes to the timeline, or if there's something I missed or maybe even misinterpreted, you can respectfully let me know in the comments down below. Anyways, that's gonna do it for part 1. I'll see you guys in part 2. This is Nishquick signing off. Have a great day. Go play some great games today, like Xenogears and Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I'll see you guys in the next one later. Hey guys, this is Nishquick. Thank you so much for watching that video, and if you enjoyed it, check out these 2 videos on the left, and maybe subscribe if you haven't on your way out. And big shout out to all my channel members whose names you can see on the screen right now. I'll see you guys in the next video. Later.